It is the beginning of the 20th century, and the white spaces on the world map are almost filled. The few that remain include the two peaks of the globe, the northern and southern poles. But this is not to last much longer, for Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen is starting an expedition to the North Pole. After months of preparation, nerves and unbelievable twists and turns, on December 14, 1911, together with its 4 companions, he really conquers the pole. But not the northern one, but the southern one. Later he will describe the greatest story of his life in these very true words. Never has man reached a goal so diametrically opposed to the original one. Amundsen, who was born in Borge, Norway in 1872, was attracted to remote places from an early age. His family owned ships and he had sea captains among his relatives, but his mother made him study medicine. Immediately after her death, he left school and at the age of 21 set out on his travels. One of his first real adventures was a Belgian scientific expedition to Antarctica, when their ship Belgica froze in the ice and the crew had to spend the winter on board. In another expedition between 1903 and 1906, Amundsen and his ship Gioa were the first to make the so-called Northwest Passage from Greenland along the coast of North America to Nome, Alaska. This expedition later proved to be crucial. From the Inuit he learned skills that he would later put to good use many times. It was mainly about the use of draft dogs, but also here he understood that real animal fur warms a man much more than a wool coat, or that raw meat can save a ship's crew from scurvy, a disease caused by long-term vitamin C deficiency, which was the bogeyman of all sailors at the time. Amundsen was a largely unconventional explorer. For him, expeditions to unexplored lands were primarily a winner-take-all competition. His greatest role model was another famous Norwegian polar explorer, Fridtjof Nansen. In 1893, he had his ship Fram frozen in ice and drifted along the Siberian coast in the hope of reaching the North Pole. He may not have succeeded, but he became a legend to the next generation of polar explorers. Now in 1907, Amundsen comes to him with a request to lend him the Fram. Nansen agrees on the condition that his ship is used to thoroughly explore the currents in the Arctic Ocean. Amundsen promises, hires a crew, and begins to dream of raising the Norwegian flag at the North Pole. But his dream was to die before it even began to come true. In September 1909, news came that the North Pole had been conquered by 2 different American expeditions, one under Frederick Cook, the other under Robert Peary. And although the Arctic Ocean mission could still have yielded a number of major discoveries, Amundsen was clear. This was not the way. However, the ship was already hired, the crew hired, and so in August 1910, the Fram set sail for the north. At least that's what all but 2 of the team think. It is only after 4 weeks when he reaches Madeira that Amundsen knows that now no one can stop him. It's time to get the truth out. We'll continue south. The British plan to incorporate Antarctica into their empire, and Robert Scott is already on his way with 65 men, snowmobiles and ponies. The only thing he seems to have forgotten is us. Thus begins what is now called the race to the South Pole. Many see Amundsen's unexpected maneuver as foul play, but he doesn't take it as a low blow. Moreover, he's not going to take the same route as his competitor Scott. The Norwegian expedition is taking a completely new route where no human has ever set foot before. He is establishing a base in Bay of Whales. As the crow flies, it's about 1,300 kilometers. He will plan his journey through the Queen Maud Mountains, whose peaks reach over 3,000 meters. Later, some will say that Amundsen was lucky and that the expedition was not nearly as difficult as the British effort. But the truth is that the crew of the Fram was superbly prepared. Not only was their base almost 100 kilometers closer to the pole than the place from which their British competitors wanted to start, but they also gradually managed to set up more supply posts along the way than Scott. All 5 of the men who eventually set out on the final part of the expedition could navigate and were all skilled skiers. They were warmed by animal furs and helped with their cargo by dogs, some of which Amundsen did not hesitate to shoot and eat during the journey. Then at last it comes. In mid-December, the 5 polar explorers arrive on the scene. To his delight, he finds no trace of the British expedition. If this is indeed the South Pole, they are the first. Numerous surveys follow, but soon there is no doubt. They are indeed at the southernmost point of our planet. Amundsen leaves a tent with a Norwegian flag and a letter for Scott's expedition. The latter, completely devastated by a series of unfortunate events, arrives here 34 days later, and upon seeing the Norwegian tent, succumbs to sheer despair. Amundsen and his men returned to the Bay of Whales base after 99 days. He made the trip 10 days faster than he had planned. He returns to Europe in March 1912 and finds that there is no news of Scott's expedition yet. Then, when the world learns early the next year that all the members of Scott's polar team died on the return trip, it gives Amundsen's phenomenal achievement a bitter taste. The British press in particular criticizes his sudden change of plan and the cruel treatment of the dogs, while the dead Scott becomes a national hero. In the following years, Amundsen plans an expedition to the north, which he promised to Nansen. However, because of the First World War, he is not able to make it until 1918 with his new ship Maud. However, the ambitious Norse is already dreaming of something completely different: the conquest of the North Pole from the air. It is a very modern vision at a time of booming aviation development, but it will drive him to bankruptcy. As a result, among other things, he is forced to send back to Siberia the 2 Inuit girls he adopted during his last voyage. But even this does not diminish his obsession with the North Pole. Amundsen's dream would come true in May 1926. That's when he and 15 other men actually reach the North Pole. However, he is not able to stand on it. He sees it only from the window of the airship Norge. The ethnically diverse crew drops a trio of flags in the snow: a Norwegian, an American, and an Italian. The latter is said to be the largest of all, which only deepens Amundsen's rift with Italian Umberto Nobile, whose crew is handling the technical side of the flight. Yet it is a momentous day, the expedition being the first to reach the pole without a trace of doubt. It also proved that it lies on a frozen ocean, not land. And Amundsen? He becomes the first man to see both poles of the Earth. Nobile will return to the North Pole once more. In 1928 aboard the airship Italia, this time without Amundsen. Yet paradoxically, it is this expedition that writes the last chapter of Amundsen's life story. On May 25, 1928, about 100 kilometers northeast of the Svalbard archipelago, the Italia, with 16 people on board, is wrecked. Rescue teams from 8 countries come to the rescue. Norway cannot miss. And although Amundsen's relationship with Nobile was not a warm one, he flies out on June 18 with 5 other men to search for survivors. What followed, no one can say with certainty to this day, but we know that Amundsen's team never reached the wreckage of Italia. His seaplane, Latham 47, most likely crashed into the Barents Sea in dense fog. The entire crew perished. A float and part of the crashed machine's tank were later found off the Norwegian coast. The greatest polar explorer of all time died prematurely. He was only 55 years old. But he left just as he had lived his life. In full action, battling harsh natural conditions and searching for the undiscovered.